Hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Ben Beshear with LiveWell Capital, and we are partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT, CDO IQ, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in a series of interviews. Today, I'm excited. We have the pleasure of speaking with Kon Leong, CEO of ZL Technologies. Kon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
What do you think is next if the answer is intrusion in the short run to get privacy right in the long run? What's the next step for governance?
Privacy is only one aspect of governance. You can have all kinds of controls and so forth. And in a sense, every great technology advancement goes through that cycle. You can take the issue of nuclear energy, can be used for good, can be used for bad. Once the cat is out of the bag, you try and manage it. So far, we're doing a decent job. So far, I don't know how long it's going to continue. And the same thing goes for technology. You can actually have the power to do a lot of good, but that specter of abuse of power is always hanging overhead.
Right.
And the more powerful the technology, the more impactful any thing that goes awry could have some huge impact on society. I give you, for example, if you have all of these mechanisms to control every piece of information out there, you have to have it anyway in order to provide the good stuff, such as privacy. If
Right.
you have all of that and it's all being collected, you might have an issue with what happens when it falls in the wrong hands. And then you might say, oh, no, it'll never fall in the wrong hands. Well, excuse me, but how many times have the government of countries overnight said, okay, it's emergency time. All rights are suspended. And oh gosh, there's a whole lot of nifty information collection systems here. Isn't that nice? And in a think tank, I remember talking about the power of data. I remember one question I posited to the panel: what do you think would have happened if we took all the technology we had today and shipped it back into the past at the start of World War II? Would there have been a resistance? I was complimented with about 15 seconds of dead silence.
You can tell how good a question it is by how long the silence is after the question, right?
It is a little bit, it's a discomforting thought.
Right.
For example, facial recognition. Finally, we're getting to the point where we say, you know what, let's outlaw this for easy access. For example, DNA databases. Can you imagine what would happen if you wanted to start a resistance for whatever reason, but if they get one speck of your blood or saliva, they can act upon not just you, but your entire clan, family, and generation.
Crazy.
How many recruits would you have in your resistance?
Right.
I'm just positing some of these thoughts, but by the same token, we cannot be Neanderthal. We cannot be reactionary and turn back the clock. Once the cat is out of the bag, once the technology is out there, we have to make do and somehow put in the guardrails that will sustain for some time.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. I mean, I think that it's out, and we have to use it for good, which I think leads into my next question. If you think about how companies can use the technology for good, what do you think the best way for companies to manage and leverage unstructured data within their organization for the good of the enterprise, for the good of the clients, for the good of the employees?
I think the potential is absolutely massive, if not spectacular. Because everything that affects the corporate performance from the top line to the bottom line involves carbon-based life forms. And humans will always be the drivers, or to the benefit or the detriment of the company. If you're now able to tap into that resource and really understand the dynamics, I think we will elevate performance of enterprises to the next level very, very easily.
And a follow-up question to that: how is AI and ML being leveraged to better govern unstructured and structured data?
AI and ML are absolutely great contributors, although I would say most of the benefit is more in the ML side. AI, I think, will pick up pace when we finally are able to define what intelligence is. I'm not sure we have. If and when we do and can actually synthesize it, if we can have synthetic intelligence, I think we better run for the hills. But that's another topic altogether. That deserves another spot altogether. But AI/ML right now is used for empowering unstructured data from our viewpoint. For example, to power natural language processing, to do topic clustering where you have a whole bunch of documents, but you have to have some sort of idea as to what they're about. You can use it for sentiment analysis and apply gradients of sentiment. You can use it for segmenting bodies of documents because each of them may have different characteristics. And these, by the way, body segmentation is very, very critical for massive analytics, but most people haven't realized it yet. For example, if you're applying it to email, analyzing email, millions and billions, there's no point analyzing it if you don't segment out legal disclaimers. If you try analyzing that, you're way off target. Just a side thought. And then, of course, we use AI/ML also for things like threading to connect communications. These are some sample areas where we use a lot of ML and AI.
And do you think the broad population, our non-technology people in the broad population, has any idea what's possible in AI or ML? Do you think there's any, whenever I talk to a technology person, my mind is blown by what they even think is possible. How much do you think this stuff will catch people by surprise?
I would actually counter that the true power of this technology lies not in the hands of your traditional data scientists.
Okay.
In fact, I wrote an article contributed to the Harvard Business Review, which they printed, which says the true power of analytics and the insights derived therefrom really are waiting for that moment when it's placed in the hands of the rank and file. It's exactly the same as the advent of the spreadsheet. In the beginning, it was only exclusive to a few, the planners of corporate departments, and it was very expensive. But it was very kludgy and very limited in its application and solutions. But when it became an easy to afford spreadsheet, that's when the use of the spreadsheet took off like a rocket. And that's when the rank and file came in with all kinds of different ways to use the spreadsheet. Now we couldn't live without it. The same thing is waiting for analytics, where it becomes so easy to use that the rank and file will say, hey, you ever think about this or that? Let me give you an example. A typical question such as, gee whiz, who are my top performers in my company? Typically, you'd end up calling on a top-notch consultancy who will charge you millions upon millions, come back to you a year or two later with all sorts of performance benchmark templates, metrics, and so forth, implement a whole system to track them. And usually it dies of its own weight because it's just too much effort going in for the output. Then the rank and file, we had this actual discussion where one of the rank and file participants said, you know, this is too much heavy lifting. You have to define the performance benchmarks for each function, for finance, accounting, sales, marketing. How about if we ask the question in a different way? How about we say, do top performers communicate in a different way? That was an epiphany. Yes, indeed, they do. And if you tease out the patterns, the differences, you've got your top performers highlighted like Christmas lights, because they do have different patterns of communication. And even better, it is indifferent as to what they do, whether they're in finance or marketing or whatever.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, you know, as rank and file get access to better analytics, better data, how many decisions get fixed before they even move up the food chain. You know, it's an interesting observation. Sometimes leadership looks smarter than they are just because they have better access to data, right? So we've been talking a lot about unstructured data today. Let's talk a little bit about some of the risk. And not big systemic risk or evil empires or people or governments taking the information. But as we think about more simple, more common problems, leaked or breached unstructured data, what threats the compliance, privacy? What do you see there?
I think the leaks and breaches are even more impactful in a way in the unstructured domain, simply because you now have people identified, timelines specified, intent exposed. It's a crystal clear blueprint for the authorities to look at, or for competitors.
Absolutely.
So I think we should be very careful that the very power that makes this unstructured data useful can also be used for nefarious purposes. So security is a big issue there. And it augurs a totally different approach to security. Here's another big mindset shift on security. Security to date has been mostly focused on external bad players. As such, all of the defenses depend on the AAA of security. Authentication. Are you who you say you are? Authorization. Are you authorized to do what you're trying to do? Audit trails. Who did what when? Now, unfortunately, the external facing threat defense mechanism is totally inadequate to defending against internal threats. Because the AAA is already solved, they've got all of the green lights. Now what do you do? And that starts a very uncomfortable discussion usually inside corporations where, let's talk about internal threats. That means you and me. That's a bit uncomfortable.
And how should companies think about managing that conversation, right? Really easy to talk about keeping the bad guys out. Everybody's good at that, us versus them. But when we're talking about us from the inside, how would you manage that conversation?
I would actually view that from a high level view as to how you view security. If for the external players, we went from the lowest stacks of IT, such as block-in sector for storage, stored information, such as network packets and protocols. Those are the lower layers. And we've done a fair job trying to protect against external bad players. However, now the battleground shifting to the higher levels, to the application layer, where, for example, now you're concerned about content, the actual content. This trend is starting, but it hasn't even gathered momentum. For example, it's now crept into the content space, the application layer, with new approaches such as DLP, data leak protection. The next level is now go deep inside the content layer and saying, okay, this document I care about because it's got this sensitive paragraph or page. And that is actually the final destination where you protect the actual content so that external players, when they actually get there, they can't access the content. So what's the point in getting access anyway? And that is also very good for detection internally so that you can actually flag the sensitive content, take snapshots as to what the flow is naturally, and then look for blips that exceed certain thresholds, and then set off an alarm so that you can catch Ed Snowden before he leaves the premises.
Kon, this has been a fun conversation today. So thank you to Kon Leong for joining me today. Please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews. This was a lot of fun today. Thank you, Kon.
Okay, thanks, Ben.